Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. So on today's video, finally got around to reviewing this Cadisen C8206. If you guys are aware, a couple of weeks ago I did unbox two Cadisen watches. One was the Seamaster homage and one is this one that you see in front of you. Of course, it's homaging a vintage sub-style watch, but more famously, in our world anyway, in our community, it's homaging the San Martin vintage diver. Now Cadisen have released like three 38mm watches in the recent months. I reviewed the 6.2 mass homage, the one I spoke about before, and of course this one. And overall, I think they're doing really well. I definitely think they can take Pagani out the game. I think they're much better built than Pagani. Specs is hard to gauge, as you know, with AliExpress. Going as low as $60, $70. They've all got sapphire, they've all got steel, and for around the $60 to $80 mark, you can get automatic movement, and even cheaper. So specs is nothing to really gauge anything on these days, especially considering, since we all know about AliExpress, the specs are the same on every single watch, but it's all about build quality. Now I'm starting to summarize slightly from the front because I know not everybody watches the videos to the end. I think these Cadisens are, as I said, going back to my point, built way better than Pagani's, and they've got some really good features on there, and they are quite impressive. Now, how does this one stack up against the ones that I've seen? So very impressed with the 6.2 mass homage. The Seamaster, so it was impressive. It was built well. I just had a couple of issues on there. And with this Cadisen, I'm going to go through all the features, all the main points of the watch, and give you my good points and the negative points. So we're going to start off on the dial with this one. Now, the thing I do like about this dial is, number one, the dateless setup. Great symmetry, allows you to see that dial in its entirety. And the second thing I do like about it is the actual color. Now, it is slightly matte, but it's a deep black. You can see it's not that wash type grey that we see on San Martins and a lot of other watches. So I like this. I like the color on it. It's got a mixture of printed and applied features, as you can see. Printing text just below the 12 and above the 6, giving you the water resistance rating, etc. And the applied markers are really well placed. They've got polished gold frames around there. They're dead centered, no alignment issues, and large areas for lume. Of course, you've got the polished Merc style hands. Again, no issue with that considering the style it is homaging. So everything is built well. The thing you'll notice about the lume, it isn't that yellowy lume or orangey lume. It's more of a pale yellow. So quite an odd color, and there is a bit of a mismatch between the lume on the dial hands and the bezel. Although it's not that bad. It's not overly noticeable, but once you kind of adjust your eyes to the two different shades used, then you can kind of see it. Now, going back to the dial, that dateless setup isn't followed through with the Seiko NH38. It's got a ghost position Seiko NH35 with a clicking and present date wheel. Now, I find that quite lazy. At least take the date wheel out. The price point for this watch is £110, so around $130. So yeah, I can't possibly forgive them for not using the NH38. From what I've seen on AliExpress, they're a bit more pricier than the NH35s. However, I think at wholesale level, they still should be cheaper. Now, with the movement aside, let's go over, have a quick look at the lume, because I'm very impressed with the lume they've used. They've got ample layers applied. It's very decent. It's not super bright, but the only thing I can see that is slightly different, or there's a discrepancy, is that the lume on the handset is just slightly brighter than the lume on the actual dial and on that pip. But nothing to complain about. Definitely not a deal breaker. As I said, more than ample lume, way more than Pagani design give you anyway. This is why I think these are Pagani design killers. Now, looking at the bezel, you have an aluminium insert, and I don't mind that at all. You've got some nice etchings there. You can see the markers down to the 15 minutes, and so are the other numerals. A raised lume pip, and I like that aluminium look because it gives you a vintage or retro feel to the watch, in line with the aesthetics. That's totally fine. The machining of the bezel is very close to the San Martin in the terms that the grooves are engraved the same. It's been cut out fine enough. However, it is very rough. It's not been finished as well as a San Martin. When you rub your fingers over the edge of that bezel, you can feel quite a bit of roughness, and that's from the edges of the cutouts where the tools kind of machined it, but they haven't smoothed that out. So that is what you can feel. It's quite rough. Rotation wise, it's a 90 click unidirectional bezel. Let's check the rotation. Now, it sounds better than the 6.2 mass homage and that Seamaster that I reviewed, the Seamaster homage, sorry. However, you do have just a slightest bit of wobble, and you've got a touch bit of back play, but that back play helps you kind of align that bezel. So if I follow the click, it's a bit out of line, but with that bit of back play, I can line it up perfectly fine. And that doesn't really bother me, especially at this price point, because I do have a line bezel at the end of it, and there is just a touch bit of back and forward. Nothing up and down, side to side. There's no rocking. It is pretty tight aside from that. The crown functions okay. I like the crown size. You've got the Cadisen logo. It is fully polished, machined well enough, and it's just slightly gritty on the screw in, screw out, but nothing that difficult to use. In fact, I think it's the whole design of the watch where I find difficulty in using the crown. That's because the crown is so close to the edge of that bezel where your finger does touch it, so you have to kind of operate it in a different way, or you have to be quite careful in order for you to screw the crown in. Now we'll move on to the case. This is where I think the Cadisen definitely does shine. Literally, you've got these polished beveled edges along the side of the case. I absolutely love those, and I'll say it every time I see a watch with this. But the brushing is very fine. If you look at the lugs, you've got linear brushing. Side of the case, you've got this satinized brushing along there. Very neatly done. I don't see no issues on there. You can just about see the grain. So that quality of case to come at this price point is definitely really good. If I recall, I was looking at one of the Pagani designs that did this. I think the BB58 homage, and you could see like discrepancies between the transitions from these polished highlights, and here you've got very like clean cuts. Yeah, flawlessly done. I like that definition on the edge. Yeah, very well done. No overrun on the brushing or the polishing. Yeah, I'm very happy with that case, and it feels good in hand. Now, turning the watch around, case back is plain and simple. You've got some brushing across the center and specifications around the outside. Pretty plain and simple case back, and it looks pretty well done, and it does match the overall theme of the watch. Now let's move on to the bracelet. You've got solid end links. You've got faux rivets, which I'm quite happy with. I don't mind at all because they are an absolute ball ache to kind of unscrew. But these screw-in links, very easy to screw out. I've took out some links and all the sizes from a bracelet, and I had zero issues with the screws. Buttery smooth threads and no issues at all. Clasp is milled internals. You got a fold over twin pusher clasp, Cadisen logo across there, brushed very finely indeed. No sharp edges to the clasp, no sharp edges to the bracelet as well. And you can see that has been finished very finely indeed. Hairline brushing on there, so not satinized, but I'm liking all this advanced level of finishing. If you go back a couple of years, we did not see this level, so I think competition is definitely good, because you get some really well finished watches at, of course, this low price point. Now the problems with the bracelet, yeah, you've got that. It sounds a bit jangly. You've got quite a bit of play between the links. Now I have identified that play down to the top where these faux rivets are, and that's due to the pins they've used. You can just about see, like, through the gap there, it's just what pins are used, and I believe they're quite thin, therefore you do have quite a bit of rattle on there. If they had thicker pins, it would be a much more solid bracelet, but having said that, you do also have female end links, and look at the fit and finish of those end links, right? And going back years ago, at this price point, you didn't find this. You found gaps, you found misalignments, you found the links did not fit well enough. The only thing I can see is where that link, you've got just the tiniest bit of edge protruding there, but it has no effect on wear. So very impressed with how the bracelet fits the case, impressed with the case, and just a few observations on the bracelet. I mean, for that price point, I don't expect perfection at all. The taper on this is not a lot. It's 20mm lug width going down to 18mm, back up to 20 at the clasp. So I think it could have done with a bit more of a taper, possibly down to 16 with a 16mm clasp. And we'll see how it looks on wrist just shortly. Well, actually now we can put it on wrist. I'm done with the bracelet. So let's see how it wears on this wrist. So here's the Cadisen C8206 on my 6.5-inch wrist. You can see how the bracelet sits on that wrist, very comfortable, amazing dimensions, 38mm at the bezel, a 37mm case. You've got a very compact lug-to-lug of 45mm plus those female end links, a thickness of just 13mm with a flat sapphire crystal, and as I said, 20mm on the lugs. So it wears really well. It is very comfortable. I can't feel any sharp edges on wrist, and I think this is perfectly proportioned to my 6.5-inch wrist, and up to 7 inches it look great, and it won't feel undersized at all. So I think they've done well with this. I can definitely see myself wearing it, and as I said, bringing it back to the price point. it is really well finished. It's got two kind of weaknesses. One at the bezel. The finishing I'm not too worried about. Like I said, it's slightly rough, but just that rotation, just a touch flimsy. I know how picky we can get. That's why I'm mentioning that. Bracelet, like I said, it is a bit jangly. It does make a few squeaks and rattles, but I don't think we can expect much more than that. Bonus with this style of design, they're going to suit these dark brown leather straps, or rubber straps for that matter, and they will still look great. I like the choice of using an aluminium bezel insert. I like the dial, I like the color, and I like the lume on there. So it's definitely positive in so many different spots on this watch. It's definitely a stronger candidate than Pagani design. Definitely, I think, blow them out the park, and it's done well on so many things with just one major weakness being the bracelet. But again, it's not even that bad. Like I said, it's finished well enough, so it kind of makes up for it. So for £110, $130 odd, you can get yourself a pretty well made watch, and I am impressed with Cadisen. They don't really get looked at as much as for example, Pagani design. And we keep bringing you Pagani design watches, still saying the same thing again and again with the poor lume, but they still get sold. So Cadisen's coming in now, and they're giving us vintage inspired watches, some really nice designs, and they're giving you a very decent quality, and that's something that you can see in front of your eyes. So if you're interested in getting one of these, check out the link in the description. I think you should be happy enough with this watch. So that's it for me today. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you on the next video.